Hello, my dear emperors. I'm Marco, and tonight we're drifting into the story of 5 ancient empires that collapsed overnight, I guess. Why I guess? Because this isn't your usual history lecture. Here, we don't just talk about the Hittites or the Khmer. We speak as if you were one of them. This is a second-person journey, immersive, a little sarcastic, and meant to carry you gently into sleep while your mind wanders through time. From the fortified heights of Hattusa to the water-woven tombs of Nan Madol, from gunpowder echoes in Songhai to the eerie Iberian silence of Tartessos. This story doesn't give you neat conclusions. It begins on the edge of mystery and whispers you into the void. So if you're up for it, let the world fade, dim the lights, and join me. You're breathing in Anatolian dust as the sun cracks pale over the horizon. You don't know it yet, but you're living in the final weeks of the mighty Hittite Empire. Your king, Suppiluliuma II, is trying his best, which is to say, scribbling out diplomatic notes on clay and sending out envoys to cities that no longer respond. The Bronze Age collapse is a storm cloud that doesn't scream apocalypse. It just kind of happens. And you, unfortunately, are in the eye of that soft, bureaucratic hurricane. Yesterday, the grain shipments from Arzawa didn't arrive. This morning, the western outposts haven't sent their usual scrolls. A week ago, there was a report, no, a whisper, that the Sea Peoples had hit the Levant. But you shrug it off. Empires don't just vanish. That would be ridiculous. Except, spoiler alert, that's exactly what's about to happen. Hattusa, your capital, still looks impressive. Massive cyclopean walls, ceremonial gates flanked by lion statues, and streets lined with limestone, but there's something brittle. The scribes are still scratching out annals, and the priests still light their incense, but there's an undercurrent, like the silence before a glass shatters. You pass the temple of the storm god. Its steps are cracked, faintly. A merchant mutters about wolves coming too close to the city, and you shrug again. Maybe it's just a bad harvest year. Maybe the king knows what he's doing. Oh, sweet, loyal you. One evening you find yourself summoned to a public square. A clay tablet is being read aloud, a plea to Ugarit, a trading partner and friendly neighbor. The message? Supplies are low. The enemy is near. Help us. It's not a declaration of war. It's not a heroic stand. It's begging on clay. It would be tragic if it weren't so hauntingly quiet. See, the Hittite scribes, bless their tired styluses, never stopped writing. Even as the empire's arteries were cut one by one, they kept documenting. Enemy ships offshore, no response from the south, the palace lacks food. These aren't grand final speeches, they're clerical heartbeats, steady as the world ends around them. And yet, you keep going to the temple. You pour out wine that no one imported. You pray to Tarhunt, the storm god, though the sky's been clear for weeks. Not because you're naive, because routine is the last thread tethering you to the illusion of safety. Historians still argue whether the Hittites were wiped out by internal strife, climate shifts, or those enigmatic sea peoples whose job apparently was just to ruin civilizations and never leave a forwarding address. But from where you stand, which is ankle-deep in fading empire, it doesn't matter. One morning, the gates don't open. Not because anyone attacked, but because no one was left to open them. The guards are gone. The priests stopped showing up. The tablets end mid-sentence. You sit by the Great Wall, watching jackals slink into courtyards once filled with chants and festival drums. It's not a collapse with a bang. It's the slow fading of a flame no one knew was dying. And somewhere, deep in a cracked storeroom, sits the last message. A tablet smeared hastily, unreadable in parts, with the final words being something like, "They are here." But that can wait until after your next dream. It's the scrape of stylus on clay that wakes you next, not the clash of swords or the roar of siege engines. No, your alarm clock is a sleep-deprived scribe hunched under flickering oil light, trying to squeeze one more plea onto a damp tablet. You don't know his name. No one does. But if there were awards for most stressed person in a collapsing empire, he'd be a finalist. You hover over his shoulder as he writes, pausing only to wipe sweat from his brow with a rag that used to be ceremonial linen. The message, something between a diplomatic olive branch and a desperate Yelp review. Our cities are burning. The enemy is in the field. We need grain. Please respond. The delivery method, a courier who hasn't shown up for 3 days. Outside, Hattusa creaks under the weight of quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't just feel empty, it feels wrong. The temples remain open, but the gods inside them seem to be packing up their divine affairs, discreetly slipping out the back. The market's not bustling, it's lightly rustling. That's not a good sound. The king hasn't been seen in days. His officials speak in hushed tones about reallocating resources, which is the Bronze Age version of everyone's on fire, but let's pretend it's budget related. You, meanwhile, try to keep your mind focused. Maybe the Mitanni will help, or Ugarit, or anyone. But here's the thing, they won't, because they're all either collapsing too, or they've already gone full ghost town. It's like a slow motion domino chain, where each piece thinks it's stable until it tips. And the scribes keep writing. One of them starts chronicling not news but rumours, enemy ships seen off the coast of Cyprus, villagers fleeing from the west, temple thefts, droughts, bad omens, missing livestock. One tablet ends ominously with, "And then the stars moved." Maybe poetic, maybe a panic-induced astronomy error, who knows. You pass another day in the archives, watching clay dry faster than morale. A scholar tries to reassure you this is just a temporary redistribution of populations, but his eye twitches every time the drums from the hills beat closer. A rebalancing of trade routes, he says. The kind of rebalancing that involves flaming arrows and skulls on pikes, apparently. Historians still argue whether this moment, these very weeks, were part of a larger systemic collapse across the Bronze Age world, or if the Hittites simply imploded under their own weight. Climate anomalies, drought, invasions, revolts, the world's earliest collective burnout. Pick your poison. But to you, the air smells like old wine and failure. Even the royal falcons have stopped returning. Birds know when to get out. That night, a courier finally arrives, half-starved, one sandal missing, eyes wild. He collapses before anyone can even read the tablet he carried. Later, someone does. It says, "City of Ugarit destroyed. No survivors. Do not send more ships." You sit on the steps of what used to be the council hall. The fire in your brazier has gone out, and there's no one left to bring more wood. Your fingers are stained with dust from shattered tablets. There's no mourning procession, no farewell sermon, just whined stone and silence. A clay pigeon lands nearby. It's injured. You try to help, but it flutters away toward the empty horizon, as if drawn to some place that still believes in tomorrow. You sleep in the open, under a sky that has never looked more indifferent. Tomorrow, the gates will crumble, the scribes will stop, the last temple will go unlit. But for now, you dream of letters written and never answered, gods prayed to and never replying, and the slow hush of a world that forgot how to roar. It's not a door that opens, it's a canopy, emerald and wet, peeling back above your head as if the world itself is blinking awake. You're not in Anatolia anymore, you're somewhere humid, thick with the scent of damp stone, orchids, and ancient regrets. Welcome to Angkor, the jewel of the Khmer Empire, just in time to witness how even the most majestic of empires can be slowly swallowed by leaves. The air is a misty soup, and you wade through it like a dreamer floating between temple towers, carved with smiling gods. Except they're not smiling today. They seem to frown, just a bit. Maybe it's the moss, or maybe they know what's coming. The Khmer Empire isn't being destroyed by swords or sea raids. No, this one's death is a whisper, a vine curling around a cornerstone, a canal silting up, a priest forgetting to chant. You walk along the ceremonial causeway into Angkor Wat, and your sandals slap against stone engraved 5 dynasties ago. Pilgrims still come, monks still chant, but something is. A canal that once flowed like the empire's veins now dribbles weakly. A farmer tells you that the rains have become strange, late, or violent, or missing altogether. Not that anyone's keeping meteorological records, because the inscriptions have gotten very quiet. The king's last edict was 6 months ago, praising a god who seems to have transferred departments. You pass a stone reservoir, once vast and mirror still. Now it's cracked, its water level mocking its grandeur. A lotus grows sideways from its edge, like it's too embarrassed to bloom properly. And still the temples gleam in the sun. It's confusing, almost offensive. Angkor isn't supposed to fall. It's too pretty, too organized, too intricate. You think about that as you step into the Bayon temple and look up at 216 massive stone faces of Avalokiteshvara smiling from the towers. They're serene, timeless, but maybe, just maybe, one is weeping. Historians still argue whether Angkor fell from ecological collapse, foreign invasions, economic failure, or simply over-complexity. Too many canals, too many gods, too many palms on too few plows, or maybe they just got tired. That happens. You spend a week wandering between temples that still hum with sacredness. Every night, a few more villagers leave. Every morning, the jungle seems closer. It's not charging in like a barbarian horde. It's gently encroaching, like a dinner guest who slowly puts their feet up on your couch and doesn't leave. One evening, you stand on Phnom Penh Hill and look down at Angkor as dusk spills over the rice paddies. The city still sparkles, but it's a lonely sparkle, like a chandelier in an empty ballroom. You can almost hear the forest breathing. It's not dramatic. There are no flames, no declarations, no conqueror riding in on an elephant with a megaphone. There's just one monk, leaving his shrine for the last time, brushing dust from his robe as he steps into the undergrowth. Later, no one will know the exact day Angkor fell. That's the thing. Some endings are blurry on purpose, conveniently unphotogenic. You sleep beneath a banyan tree that has slowly wrapped its roots around a broken archway. It looks like the tree is protecting the temple, or maybe feeding on it. Hard to tell. And in your dream, the temple sighs. You wake to silence, not the clean kind, but the messy silence of something important having just ended. The monk is gone. The chants have stopped. You walk barefoot along a stone path where vendors once hawked rice cakes and charms. Now it's just you and the jungle is winning. Angkor's collapse doesn't happen in one dramatic flash. No horseman declares it, no calendar marks it in red. It's the kind of ending that sneaks up on you while your back is turned, adjusting irrigation schedules. The city simply exhales, and then no one breathes back in. You enter what was once a library, or maybe a treasury. It's hard to tell now. Vines loop through the windows like they've always belonged there, which in a way they have. A single stone carving catches your eye. A dancer, arms frozen in motion. Her smile too perfect. Was she mid-performance when the world turned its back? A young girl scurries past you. You follow. She leads you to her family's makeshift cart. They're leaving Angkor, heading to the east, toward rumors of a newer capital. You ask them why. The father shrugs. The waters don't behave. That's it. That's the obituary. The waters don't behave. Historians still argue about that phrase. Climate data suggests intense drought followed by catastrophic monsoon floods. A water system as complex as Angkor's doesn't take kindly to surprise. When it collapses, it doesn't trickle, it spirals. There's also talk of the Siamese army, Ayutthaya's soldiers marching in from the west. A few skirmishes, some looting, but honestly, the jungle does more damage than the swords ever could. You try to light incense at a shrine. It sputters, not because of the rain, it's dry tonight, but because the god it was meant for isn't listening. Maybe he took the last cart east. In a final act of devotion or denial, a group of elders gather to chant beneath the central tower of Angkor Wat. The echoes bounce oddly, not like they used to. A storm gathers in the distance. Someone whispers, "Heaven is reclaiming its mirror." You don't know what that means, but it sounds about right. And then, nothing. One by one, the last loyal families leave. They take their idols, their scrolls, their elephants. What they don't take, the forest does. Fast. Within a generation, Angkor is half forgotten. Within two, it's a story. By the third, it's a myth too elaborate to be true. European explorers, centuries later, will stumble upon the towers and whisper of a lost city in the jungle. Locals will raise eyebrows. It's always been there. You sit by the temple moat as the sky goes violet. Frogs chirp like distant drums. Fireflies blink like lanterns of ghosts who refuse to migrate. The water ripples, not from wind, but from memory. And you finally sleep, lulled by stone, vine, and the slow green hush of a kingdom undone not by fire but by forgetting. It's the stone that hums beneath you now, not with magic, not with machinery, but with memory, the kind of ancient vibration that rattles through your bones and says quietly, "Something mattered here." You're sitting on the edge of what was once a sacred basin, Angkor Thom's great burrow, now shallow, patched with reeds, and inexplicably shimmering like it remembers being important. A breeze shuffles the palm fronds above you, like a librarian rearranging forgotten chapters. You wander past statues that line a now flooded avenue, their faces worn, their hands reaching out in eternal, unanswered gesture. These were guardians once. Now they're just decorative witnesses to an empire nobody really remembers how to explain. This is the phase of collapse people rarely talk about, the part where everything looks almost intact. The temples still stand, the roads still exist, but the soul of the place, that packed up years ago, now it's just empty theatre. You hear a monkey scream in the distance. It echoes like applause after the actors have already left the stage. You climb to the top of Prerop Temple for a view of the horizon. It should show you command, domain, reach. Instead, it shows you green, infinite, reclaiming green. The forest doesn't even rush, it just waits. And as the Khmer faded, the forest obliged. You catch a glimpse of a half-buried stone carving, a celestial nymph locked in a forever dance. Her smile hasn't cracked, but it feels strained. Maybe she's laughing at you, or maybe she's just confused why you're still here, long after the last priest whispered his final prayer and vanished into the mist. Historians still argue whether the people truly abandoned Angkor, or just shifted imperially elsewhere, taking their ceremonies with them, but leaving behind the facades, like spiritual Airbnb units. Maybe they thought they'd return, maybe they meant to. But time is rude like that. It doesn't pause for your temple renovation plans. It doesn't care that you've etched cosmic calendars into sandstone, or drained half the Mekong to water your rice. It moves on, and so do the people. What remains? Rituals without participants, shadows of banners, mosquitoes, and always the steady breath of vines coiling around every arch, politely unbuilding the past. You spend your last night in Angkor with a single candle and a crumbling stone lion. You talk to it, half joking, half sincere. Do you remember when this place meant something? The lion says nothing. He never did. At dawn, a mist rolls through like stage fog, and when it clears, the city seems smaller, not ruined, not destroyed, just forgotten. Angkor didn't burn, it didn't bleed, it just stopped being heard. You walk east, barefoot, leaving no trail, while the jungle softly claps behind you, not for you, of course, but for itself. Now you're standing on the warm dust of the Sahel, and the wind is different here, dry, commanding, carrying whispers of trade routes and legends carved in sand. This is Gao, capital of the mighty Songhai Empire, and tonight you'll get to experience the rarest kind of historical magic trick, an empire disappearing not over generations, but in less than a week. The Songhai were the big kids on the block. After Mali fizzled out, Songhai stepped in like the cooler, shinier sequel. At its peak, this empire stretched across thousands of miles, linking cities, salt mines, scholars, and sorcerers under one golden sun. You stand on the city wall of Gao, and it's bustling. Traders argue over camels, gold glints from tunics, and the mosque towers up like a confident finger pointing toward heaven. But that's all yesterday. Today, something smells off. Not metaphorically, genuinely off. Like smoke and iron. Someone screams in the distance. Another sound follows. Sharp, alien. You've never heard it before. It isn't a drum or a spear hitting a shield. It's a crack. Then another. Then a rhythm of them, like thunder, learned how to shoot straight. The Moroccans have arrived. You didn't even know Morocco had ambitions like this. You assumed they were just busy with spice trade and coastal politics. But no, they've sent an army, a real army, with matchlock muskets, powder, and mercenaries, who look bored, as if destroying centuries of civilization was just another Tuesday. Historians still argue about why Morocco launched this expedition. Some say it was to control the gold trade. Others claim it was economic desperation or royal overreach. What everyone agrees on, Songhai didn't see it coming, not like this. You run to the mosque of Askia. It's not burning yet, but the imam is packing scrolls into baskets like they're oranges. He mutters something about Timbuktu must not fall. You want to ask what's in the scrolls, but he's gone. The city's defences crumble in hours. Songhai's army, proud and massive, was built for desert warfare and man-to-man combat, not for this strange thunder from Morocco. They scatter, they die, they disappear. In the chaos you find yourself wandering the royal district. The palace door is open, no guards. Inside, a room still smells of perfume and roasted lamb. The silk cushion bears the faint impression of someone who sat too recently. You sit in their place, you're emperor now, for about 10 minutes. Outside, the crack of gunpowder continues. Gao is done. The empire doesn't realize it yet. That'll come later, when the cities refuse to answer letters, when trade dries up, when the scholars in Timbuktu whisper to each other, there's nothing left to protect. You walk out of the palace as smoke drapes the sunset in melancholy gold. A child runs past you, holding a broken spear. Behind her, a Moroccan soldier just watches, resting casually against a wall. Like this is all part of his shift. That night, as the flames recede, you sit by the Niger River. You remember the stories of kings like Sunni Ali and Askia the Great, of scholars who wrote volumes while sand blew through their windows, of merchants who moved wealth without moving a muscle. And just like that, the empire is gone. No famine, no jungle, no centuries-long decline. Just a few days of gunpowder and stunned silence. You dip your hand into the river and wonder if water remembers. The morning after an empire falls should feel different. You expect ashes, ghosts, perhaps some philosophical clarity. But what you get is the awkward buzz of reality setting in. Gao is quiet now, not peaceful, just stunned. The kind of silence that hangs over a room after someone says something unforgivable and then leaves. The Moroccan army is still here. They've set up a few tents, taken over the nicer homes, and casually renamed parts of the city as if history were a game of Monopoly. They don't seem interested in building a new empire, just in proving they could break this one. You walk through the market square. Yesterday it pulsed with life. Today a goat munches on a merchant's ledger, and the awning of the fishmonger's stall flaps like a forgotten flag. A man sweeps sand off his doorstep with the same commitment Someone might brush crumbs from an abandoned table. Timbuktu, the intellectual heart of Songhai, doesn't fall with fire, it falls with confusion. The Moroccan commander marches in, nods at the architecture, and immediately begins asking where the gold is. The scholars, they hide their manuscripts under floorboards, behind walls, and in jars buried beneath the sand. You help one of them dig. He thanks you in verse, then asks if you know how to disappear. Historians still debate how much was truly destroyed. The libraries technically survived. The mosques still stood. But knowledge, like power, doesn't need fire to vanish. It just needs fear. And now fear is everywhere. You pass a room where 20 students used to recite from memory. Poetry, law, astronomy. It now houses gunpowder kegs and the occasional confused lizard. A Moroccan soldier asks if you know where the city's silver is kept. You say nothing. He offers a shrug and moves on. Even the conquerors seem unsure what victory means. Back in Gao, a group of elders meet in secret. You eavesdrop. They argue about whether this is a pause or an ending. We've survived invasions before, one says. Another shakes his head, eyes heavy. Not with thunder. That's what the locals now call the muskets. Thunder. They don't understand them, not really. To them it's magic, bad magic, the kind that doesn't come with a ritual or a warning. The royal line vanishes. The bureaucracy crumbles. There are attempts at resistance, half-hearted rebellions, scribbled letters declaring the empire shall return. But you can feel it. Songhai isn't sleeping. It's dissolving. And the Moroccans, they overextend. They can't control what they've conquered. The logistics are nightmarish. The gold never quite flows as expected. Eventually, they pull back. But by then, Songhai is dust without a shape. You stand in the shadow of a mosque, once called the crown of Islam in Africa. Its minaret leans ever so slightly now. Maybe that's symbolic. Maybe it's just erosion. You ask an old woman what she remembers. She tells you, when I was a child, I dreamed of the sea. Now I only dream of silence. And that night, as you lie beneath the stars, stars that scholars once charted in endless scrolls, you wonder if they're watching any of this, or if they've already moved on to a different empire, one with better odds. The streets of Timbuktu are quieter now, not from fear, but from resignation. This isn't a panic, it's more like collective disbelief, with a side of shrug. You wander through alleys once animated by merchants, reciting poetry with their prices, and now you hear nothing but sandals brushing sand and the occasional cough from a rooftop. You duck into a mud-brick madrasa, one of those fabled schools of wisdom where scholars once debated astronomy, theology, and whether poetry should rhyme. The door creaks. Inside, a boy is erasing a chalkboard with his sleeve. He doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. He knows you're not here to learn. Nobody is. The headmaster greets you with a nod, heavy with disappointment. Not in you specifically, just in everything. It wasn't supposed to end like this, he mutters. Not like a bad trade. His hands tremble as he collects a stack of manuscripts, one of which contains a theory about water purification that won't resurface for centuries. Outside, a Moroccan officer tries to make a map. You watch him frown at the blank parchment, because no one thought to bring cartographers. It's not that Timbuktu can't be mapped, it's that mapping it now feels like taking attendance in an empty classroom. The books are still here, mostly, but the conversations they once sparked, gone. Knowledge requires more than storage. It needs voice, argument, laughter, coffee, and all of that has been replaced by suspicion. Historians still argue whether the Moroccan conquest truly ended Timbuktu's golden age, or merely paused it under hostile management. Some say the intellectual spirit lived on in whispered debates behind shuttered doors. Others suggest the silence was not just from fear, but fatigue, like a civilization too wise to resist a battle it had already lost in spirit. You sit at the edge of a well, one that once quenched the thirst of men who could recite entire lineages backward. Now it smells faintly of iron and regret. A student walks past you, scroll under his arm, pretending it's still normal. You both pretend. It's easier that way. A month after the fall, people are already misremembering. They came at night, says one. They poisoned the water, says another. You know that's not true. The Moroccan army arrived with paperwork and powder, not curses, but myths spread when silence needs an explanation. You help bury some of the library's oldest volumes in clay pots. The scholar directing you speaks in soft commands, more gardener than archivist. When he places the final lid on a jar, he sighs, "Let the future dig us up." He doesn't mean archaeologists. He means anyone who still believes ideas are worth protecting. And what of the empire? Songhai, the vast humming golden web that once connected Sahara to Savannah. It's now a cautionary tale told in 3 sentences. They had wealth, they had wisdom, they lost to thunder. You leave Timbuktu as the harmattan wind kicks up dust that makes you blink away tears, or maybe that's just the dryness. You don't look back. Empires hate being stared at after they've fallen. Instead, you sleep that night beneath the stars, the same ones the Songhai charted, the same ones the Moroccans ignored, the same ones that keep glowing, indifferent and eternal, like they're watching us forget. Section 9. Now you're floating, not metaphorically, but gently, audibly, over a sluggish ribbon of water. The Guadalquivir River snakes beneath your canoe like a vein of old stories, none of which seem eager to be told. You're gliding into the world of Tartessos, the Iberian mystery that whispers from the mud but refuses to say anything clearly. The reeds part, and you spot it, or what remains. Low mounds, crumbling stone, fragments of something that once glittered. Not ruins, exactly. More like the memory of a city that doesn't want to be found. Tartessos, they called it. The land of gold, silver, and secrets. Herodotus mentioned it. The Phoenicians traded here, but the locals, they stopped talking about it a long time ago. You pull up on a marshy bank. There's no one to greet you. No crumbled palaces or dramatic colonnades. Just silence and mosquitoes. So many mosquitoes. This wasn't a small village. According to the legends and a suspicious number of lost city documentaries, Tartessos was a thriving cosmopolitan hub with metallurgy, language, and enough bling to blind a modest Greek merchant. So what happened? Well, historians still argue about that. Natural disaster, flooding, foreign invasion, cultural absorption. The paperwork, as usual, is missing. What's left are half-baked references, tantalizing inscriptions, and artifacts that show up just often enough to be infuriating. You wander through what might have been a ceremonial complex, or maybe just an elaborate goat pen. It's hard to tell. The soil is rich, red, and stubborn. A broken amphora peeks from the mud like a tooth. Nearby, a slab of stone bears an inscription in an alphabet nobody can quite read. You stare at it, willing it to confess. It doesn't. The Iberian sun climbs higher. It has no answers either. The birds ignore you. There's something frustratingly elegant about Tartessos's collapse. It didn't leave behind dramatic ruins, or burn marks, or mass graves. It just stopped appearing in the narrative, as if someone flipped a page and forgot to finish the paragraph. You meet a local shepherd. His goats wander dangerously close to where you think a temple once stood. You ask him if he's heard of Tartessos. He nods solemnly and says, "There are stories." Then he points to the sky. Not the river, not the ground. The sky. You're not sure if he's being poetic or evasive. Later, at a campfire, you sip wine that tastes like smoke and eucalyptus. You try to recount what you've seen today, but the words feel incomplete. Tartessos isn't a story. It's an ellipsis. Some scholars believe the city simply sank, literally into the marshes, swallowed by rising waters and bad drainage planning. Others think it was absorbed into Carthaginian spheres of influence and politely erased. A few insist it's still there beneath your feet, blinking through the sediment like a sleeping eye. You curl up under a wool blanket, your head full of half maps and whispers. A frog croaks from the reeds. You wonder if he knows more than the archaeologists. Probably. Tartessos didn't collapse with a scream. It exhaled deeply and sank into the soil. And you drift off beside its ghost, warm and slightly annoyed. It glints, just for a second, a sharp glimmer beneath the mud, as if gold, unwilling to be forgotten, rolled over in its sleep. You kneel by the riverbank and brush aside the silt. Not a coin, not a crown, but a thin sheet of metal, etched with lines too deliberate to be random. You're not sure what it is. A plaque, a charm, an IOU from a king to a merchant, long drowned. Welcome to Tartessos, where the relics refuse to make sense. The Guadalquivir laps quietly, unbothered. You sit with the artifact in your hand, trying to feel something, awe, revelation, closure. But mostly, you just feel like a character in a mystery novel, where the writer died before finishing the last chapter. There's no city skyline to admire, no collapsed walls to scale. Tartessos was swallowed, yes, but politely. No dramatic meteor, no savage invasion. Maybe the sea levels rose, maybe the river shifted course, maybe the people just walked away one season and didn't come back. The Iberian Peninsula is like that, beautiful and slightly passive-aggressive. You trek inland a bit, following what might have been an ancient road, now a squishy suggestion beneath reeds and occasional goat tracks. You find shards of pottery, a rusted pin, a smooth stone tablet too blank to be helpful. All of it feels like evidence, but none of it says what crime was committed. Historians still argue about Tartessos' end. Did the Phoenicians siphon off its economy? Did climate shifts make the region uninhabitable? Was it Atlantis, as the more optimistic conspiracy theorists insist, just cleverly disguised under a layer of marsh and academic disdain? The gold remains the most confusing part. Tartessos had it, lots of it, enough to fund temples, decorate boats, or ruin the archaeological record with legends. But there's little sign of a treasury, no obvious loot piles, no golden statues clutching dramatic final messages, just whispers, a shimmer in the river, then nothing. You meet an old woman in a straw hat who swears her grandfather found a golden medallion in his field, but he melted it for tools. She's not sorry about it. Tools were more useful, she says, handing you a fig. You eat the fig. It's good, real, more tangible than anything Tartessos has left behind. You camp on a slight hill that may once have been a mound of royal importance, or a cow pasture. Hard to tell. The moon reflects off the river, and you imagine ancient ships sliding past, low-slung, Phoenician, Iberian, each one loaded with metals and myths. And you wonder what happens when a city decides not to be remembered, or worse, when no one tries hard enough to remember it. Tartessos could be anywhere under your feet, or nowhere at all. Its gold, its glory, all reduced to a glint in muddy water, and the warm, unsatisfying certainty that the past doesn't owe you explanations. You close your eyes. The wind rattles through nearby poplars like a sigh, not quite a goodbye, more like don't ask. You start the day with hope, which is your first mistake. Armed with a notebook, a trowel, and the misplaced optimism of someone who still thinks history wants to be found, you wander deeper into the lowlands. If Tartessos ever had suburbs, this would be them, featureless, damp, and inexplicably full of bees. The landscape is more swamp than city. Occasionally you find stones arranged in ways that might suggest walls, or altars, or sheep pens. The Iberian mud doesn't clarify, it merely absorbs your boots and your ambition with equal enthusiasm. And yet, you can't quite shake the feeling. Something happened here. You feel it in the subtle dips in the land, in the way some trees grow crooked, as if avoiding what lies beneath. There's a rhythm, a whisper, a geometry to the silence. You just can't read it. You come across what might have been a storage pit, the kind used to keep grain or, depending on your optimism, sacred scrolls. It's empty now, of course. A toad blinks up at you from the bottom, like a living punctuation mark. You nod at him. He doesn't respond. No one does. Tartessos refuses to yield a narrative. Unlike Rome or Babylon, it didn't script its rise and fall in marble. It left behind objects without context, architecture without addresses. Every discovery feels like a punchline to a joke no one remembers telling. Historians still argue whether Tartessos was even a unified culture or just a fancy name we gave to a cluster of similar settlements. The term might be Greek, or Phoenician, or just convenient. Maybe Tartessos was never meant to be found, not in the usual sense. You meet a small archaeological team camped on the edge of what might have been a canal. They're cheerful, sunburnt, and deeply uncertain about everything. One of them shows you a ceramic shard, 7th century BCE, she says, or a recent forgery. Hard to say. She laughs. You join in. It's either that or cry. Later, you climb a low ridge and look out at the marshlands stretching to the horizon. No palaces, no monuments, just earth that has absorbed its stories, like ink on skin. The river shifts slightly in its course, unconcerned with human expectations. You realize Tartessos didn't collapse like a falling building. It dissolved, a cultural sugar cube dropped into the teacup of history, and just like that, gone, sweet for a moment, and then just not there. You walk back toward your camp, slower this time, not because you're tired though you are, but because part of you doesn't want to leave, not because there's more to find, but because there isn't, and somehow that's worse. That night, as rain patters on your tent, you dream of a city made of whispers, where every wall is a question and every street vanishes mid-sentence. And you sleep, finally, not with answers, but with the strange comfort that some stories prefer to remain unfinished. You open your eyes to water, not rain, not a river, but a lagoon that looks like it was poured from a bowl made by gods with a flair for symmetry. Beneath your canoe, the Pacific gleams like molten silver, so calm it feels staged. You've drifted far, my friend, to Micronesia, to the whispering ruins of Nan Madol. No one tells you how quiet it is here. Not silent, but intentional. The kind of hush you hear in places that used to matter and still suspect they might. You paddle slowly between islets, stitched together with basalt columns, each one a little too orderly to be natural and a little too eerie to be welcoming. Nan Madol is a city built on coral and lava rock, resting gently on the sea's surface like a forgotten chessboard. You glide through narrow canals that once carried royal canoes and presumably gossip. The water laps politely, as if not wanting to wake anything that might still be sleeping beneath. You dock beside one of the main islets, where stone walls rise, 4 meters high in careful interlocking layers. There's no mortar, just geometry and ancient resolve. The stones weigh tons. The logistics boggle the mind. How did they move them here? How many people did it take? Why build a city on water? Historians still argue over that. Some say it was political, a way for the Sordell dynasty to isolate themselves from the masses. Others suggest it was spiritual, symbolic, an architectural manifestation of the cosmos, and a few quietly admit they just don't know, which frankly is the most honest answer. You explore the ruins on foot, feeling the heat rise off basalt like residual memory. There are platforms where rituals happened, tombs where kings once lay in state, and channels that might have carried fish or bodies. It's hard to tell. The city doesn't give up its secrets easily. The locals, descendants of those who came after, will tell you stories of curses, of spirits, of the place being not quite safe. Not because of anything specific, just a general consensus that Nan Madol is not to be meddled with. You nod, you get it. You sit on a fallen slab near the central complex, watching the tide nudge your canoe against a tree root. The architecture is both precise and crumbling, ancient and somehow futuristic. It feels like a ruin built by someone trying to be remembered by aliens. Nan Madol didn't collapse in fire or warfare. It faded. As the Soldeleur fell out of favour, so did their floating capital. The city outlived its rulers, then slowly outlived its usefulness. Maintaining a waterborne fortress takes effort, and effort, as every empire learns, is not infinite. Later, the ruling power moved inland. The waterlogged city was left to the crabs, the mangroves, and whatever echoes lingered in the stones. And here you are, stepping lightly, as if afraid your feet might stir the memories. As twilight sets in, the basalt takes on a deep blue hue. The whole city starts to feel less like a place and more like an idea, a monument to something too old to name. You sleep on your canoe, drifting slightly as the current nudges you between the islets. Above you, stars blink. Below you, something ancient yawns. Not dangerous, not angry, just remembering. The dawn at Nan Madol is not a sunrise, it's a slow unveiling. The mists retreat reluctantly, pulling their gauzy veil back from the ruins, like stage curtains opening on a play that hasn't been performed in centuries. You wake in your canoe, the paddle resting beside you like a loyal hound. The water's still, too still. You drift past one of the larger islets, where once stood the residence of high priests, or royalty. It depends on who you ask, and how close to sleep they were when they answered. The basalt columns here are taller, darker, less inclined to lean. They form a kind of fortress without guards, a stage without actors. And then you see them, not actual skeletons. Nan Madol is generous, but not that dramatic, but rows of upright stones that feel like they're standing in vigil, columns placed in such a way that from certain angles they resemble figures. You try to laugh it off, you're just tired, but as the canoe nudges against the islet, you hesitate. You're not alone, not really. The city watches. You explore carefully, barefoot to honour the silence. There are tomb chambers, now open to the sky, filled with leaves and the occasional curious lizard. Some of the tombs were looted long ago, others collapsed from the weight of memory, and still the place doesn't feel empty, it feels paused. Historians still argue whether Nan Madol's decline came from practical issues, rising sea levels, political shifts, dwindling resources, or something deeper, a cultural exhalation, maybe, or simply the recognition that this place, however holy, was never meant to last forever. You sit in one of the enclosures, imagining the rituals once held here, chants echoing off basalt, torches flickering against polished stone, offerings cast into the sea with trembling hands. Now it's birdsong and the creak of trees growing where roofs once spanned. The odd thing about Nan Madol is how complete it still feels. Yes, it's in ruins. Yes, it's uninhabited. But it never feels abandoned. More like politely retired. Like a great elder who stepped back from public life but still lives in the big house. You walk a narrow causeway connecting two of the islets. The tide's low now, exposing the black stone path beneath the shallows. It glistens, serpentine, as if inviting you somewhere you're not entirely sure you want to go. At the far end, you find a small chamber carved with shallow patterns. They resemble waves, stars, or perhaps just ancient doodles, made while waiting for divine instructions. A crab scuttles across the floor, utterly unimpressed by your reverence. You sit beside a mangrove, watching its roots strangle a stone platform with slow botanical conviction. This is how empires fall here, not with fire or thunder, but with roots and silence. The ocean doesn't care, the trees don't mourn. You think about the people who built this city, how much effort it took to haul stone across open water, to stack it without mortar, to maintain a floating complex in a region where nature is never in a good mood. And then at some point they just stopped. Not because they failed, but maybe because they realized the ocean would win anyway. That night you sleep with your back to a wall that still stands after 1,000 years. You dream of footsteps in shallow water, of chants half heard, of hands brushing stone in the dark. Nan Madol doesn't ask to be remembered. It just doesn't let you forget. The tide comes in, soft and slow, like an afterthought. You watch the water rise between the basalt walls of Nan Madol, flooding the narrow canals where priests once paddled, where rulers once floated like gods on barges, made of palm and pageantry. Now it's just water and you, and the sense that this city was designed not to resist time, but to accept it graciously. You glide toward the outer edge of the ruins, where the sea meets the first islets in brackish whispers. Here the walls are lower, more crumbled, like the city's memory easing into forgetfulness. You think of it as a shoreline retirement home for stones who once held power. You pass a platform that local legend calls a place of initiation or execution, or both. The truth is unclear, which makes it perfect for a ghost city. The basalt here leans just slightly, as though bowing to the waves or giving up. Nan Madol isn't built to be explained, it's built to be experienced. And as you drift between the islands, you begin to notice something, the sound. It's not just the water, there's a hush that doesn't feel empty, but full, like the city is still talking, but only in a frequency just outside your reach. Historians still argue whether Nan Madol was the seat of real centralized authority or simply a ceremonial space, an extravagant stage for a ruling class who knew the value of aesthetics. The Sodalur dynasty, those mysterious early rulers, left no literature, no statues of themselves, no imperial manifestos, just rocks, very heavy rocks. One theory says the basalt was floated across the lagoon on giant rafts using coconut fiber. Another suggests divine assistance. A third, slightly more fun theory proposes telekinesis. Just in case. You pass through a narrowing channel. The trees close in, and suddenly you feel the weight of centuries pressing gently on your shoulders. Not crushing, just reminding. This place was something. This place is something. You tie your canoe to a gnarled root, then climb onto one of the outer islets, where the ruins are barely distinguishable from the landscape. Here, nature has taken the lead. Mangroves weave through cracks. Ferns have colonized the tops of fallen columns. You find a stone that looks like it was once part of a throne, now used by a bird as a lookout post. You sit beside it, not on it. This place demands a certain humility. At sunset, the entire lagoon turns gold. Not the brassy gold of imperial wealth, but the soft shimmer of a memory replaying itself. You can almost hear the oars dipping, the chants rising, the slow beat of a ceremonial drum echoing off water and stone. And then it fades. You sleep that night beneath a tangle of trees and stars. Your dreams are filled with coral, columns, and a voice, gentle, ancient, unintelligible. You wake with the faint sense that someone told you a secret, but you forgot it instantly. Classic dream etiquette. Nan Madol remains behind you, half submerged, half remembered, still there, still waiting. You leave Nan Madol without ceremony. No farewell chants, no ghostly guardians blocking your path, just water parting under your canoe, the sun barely bothering to rise, as if it too is reluctant to say goodbye. The ruins disappear behind a turn in the lagoon, and with them the last remnants of a city that somehow felt more like a whisper than a place. You dry your hands on your shirt and look back one last time. There's nothing to see. only the shimmer of water, pretending it was never anything else. As you drift into open sea, a strange thought occurs. What if this is the normal state of empires? The disappearing, the vanishing without drama? Maybe all the noise and conquest we focus on is just the exception, the few loud deaths that happen to be recorded. Tartessos, Songhai, the Khmer, the Hittites, Nanmadol, they didn't all die in fire and betrayal. Some just stopped. No funerals, just silence. And isn't that more haunting? You find yourself running through mental lists now, civilizations that rose, dazzled, and fell with barely a ripple. The Harappans, with their perfect urban planning and their unreadable script. The Olmecs, with their giant heads and mysterious exit. The people of the Indus Valley, who vanished so thoroughly it feels like they were erased by design. Historians still argue whether these collapses were sudden or merely seem so in hindsight. Overnight, after all, is a relative term when you're measuring millennia. The Hittites didn't pack their bags in a day. The Khmer decline spanned decades, and yet, to us, flipping pages in a book, it feels like one moment they ruled the world, and the next forest. You reach the shore of another island, this one modern and cluttered with noise, and yet part of you remains elsewhere, stuck in the in-betweens. You look at buildings and wonder how they'll fall, not with dread, just curiosity. Collapse, you're beginning to understand, isn't always catastrophe. Sometimes it's just forgetting to fix a canal, skipping a festival, letting the walls lean an inch too far. Most empires don't explode. They yawn, they drift, they get tired. A shopkeeper tries to sell you a coconut. You nod, hand over some change, and sip as if nothing in the world is ancient. But the taste is strangely sacred, like a relic from a time before time. You sit near the shore, notebook open, but write nothing. What is there to say, really? Empires are just very large stories, and stories, the best ones, anyway, don't end neatly. They fade, and then they echo. And sometimes they wait for someone like you to come along, not to solve them, but to listen. Now you stand on the edge of a thought, not a city, not a ruin, but the ghost of a pattern. It's strange, this feeling. You're not in any one place anymore. You've left behind Nan Madol's sacred pools and Tartessos's muddy ambiguity, and now you float between empires like a feather caught in a draught of history. You begin to see it, a thread, thin but strong, winding through every collapse you've witnessed. It's not just about power or pride, not just about war or weather. It's about forgetting, and maybe even permission to be forgotten. Every empire you've stepped through had its reasons, valid, complex, contradictory. The Hittites fell as the Bronze Age world buckled like a collapsing spider web. The Khmer overextended into elegance. The Songhai underestimated thunder. Tartessos left too few clues. Nan Madol faded with the tide. Different causes, sure, but the rhythm, identical. Build, bloom, blink. You remember the moment in Gao, when the crack of gunpowder ended, centuries of oral tradition, or the Cambodian forest, gently caressing Angkor's towers into sleep, or the awkward pause in Tartessos, where the text just ended. No catastrophe, just a sigh. Historians still argue whether we fixate too much on the fall. Maybe the fall isn't the point. Maybe it's just the final punctuation on a very long sentence that already made its case. You pass a small museum in a coastal town. Inside is a shard of Songhai pottery, mislabeled behind fingerprinted glass. Next to it, a brochure about Angkor Wat that skips 200 years of decline with one bland phrase, eventually fell into disuse. There's also a pamphlet on lost cities that suggests Tartessos may have been partially mythical. You smile. Of course it was. Outside, kids kick a ball against a wall, older than their country. The wall doesn't mind. It's seen things You start to think about your own time. What will survive of it? Our skyscrapers? Our cloud servers? Will future travelers wander through the shells of shopping malls and ask, what happened here? And will anyone even try to answer? You sit under a tree and finally start writing. Not answers, just impressions. The feel of mossy stone under your fingers. The sound of fireflies in Nan Madol. The taste of fig in Iberia. You realize you've collected not histories, but feelings. Echoes, ghosts of empires that never truly wanted to be found. The wind picks up, leaves rustle like old documents. A bell chimes from somewhere, or maybe it's just your imagination. Either way, it marks something. You don't know what to call this moment, but it feels like a beginning. The road you follow now isn't paved, it isn't marked. It doesn't even seem particularly interested in being followed. But still, you walk it through dry fields, over broken hills, past villages that hum with radio static and the scent of frying oil. You're not chasing a specific empire now. You're chasing the absence of one. In a dusty plaza, a man tells you of a hill nearby. Once a fortress, once a capital, once something important. You climb it. There's nothing there. But that's the point. You begin to understand some ruins are visible only to those who already know what they're looking at. A dip in the earth where a wall once stood. A line of trees where a road ran. A rumor passed down through generations, diluted like wine with water. You sit on the hilltop, alone except for the wind, which seems to know more than it lets on. From here, the landscape stretches wide and blank, as if daring someone to remember it properly. You start to sense that collapse isn't always violent or sad. Sometimes it's deliberate, chosen. A society deciding it's time to dissolve into myth or melt into someone else's story, not out of failure, but out of wariness. Empires get tired too. Historians still argue whether collapse is ever truly final. The Hittites influence modern Anatolia. The Khmer echo in Cambodia's architecture. The Songhai pulse through West African music and lore. Nan Madol is still sacred. And Tartessos. Tartessos survives best as a question, one so persistent it has become part of Iberia's identity. You make your way down the hill, feeling something like reverence. Not for power, not for kings, but for endings. The kind that don't ask permission. The kind that linger longer than memory. At a roadside stall, someone sells you tea in a chipped ceramic cup. It's not old, but it feels like it is. You sip slowly. Across the road, a child plays with a toy made of scrap metal, laughing as if he's never heard of collapse. That night, you sleep near a dried riverbed. The stars above blink in silence, the same silence that wrapped the last priest of Nan Madol, the final scribe of Hattusa, the retreating traders of Gao. And in your dreams, they walk beside you, not to reclaim their empires, but just to stretch their legs. Because even vanished cities need the occasional stroll. Somewhere between dreaming and waking, you find yourself in a room that shouldn't exist. The walls are made of stone, not from one empire, but from many. Hittite limestone on one side, Khmer sandstone opposite, basalt from Nam Madol on the floor, a clay brick ceiling like something out of Tartessos, and iron sconces that look suspiciously Songhai. You blink and it doesn't go away. There's a table in the center, covered in scrolls, coins, maps, all jumbled like someone tried to organize the collapse of civilizations alphabetically and gave up halfway through. You pick up a gold coin, no face, no date, just a spiral. You turn, and the walls shift. Now you're walking through that invisible museum of fallen things, and every hallway leads to a different echo. You pass a room filled with bells that never ring, another stacked with empty thrones. One corner has a pile of worn sandals, as if every ruler decided to walk away barefoot. It's absurd, it's beautiful, and it's a reminder every empire no matter how vast, is just a brief experiment in human imagination, a test of how long we can make order hold before the jungle, the desert, the river, or our own restlessness nudges it back into dust. Historians still argue whether these collapses were tragedies or inevitabilities. You begin to suspect they were both, tragedies in the moment, inevitable in the long run, but also necessary. After all, what's more human than building something doomed just to see if it might last? In this dream place, no one speaks. The scrolls unroll themselves. The maps fold back into forests. The thrones quietly crumble. You don't feel sad. You feel calm, as if history itself is tucking itself in. A mural stretches along the back wall. It shows a serpent eating its own tail, not a symbol of destruction, but of rhythm. Collapse followed by silence. Silence followed by song. And then inevitably someone picking up a stone and saying, "Let's build something here." You wake up under a tree, surprised to find your hands empty, but the feeling stays with you. That dream of the room of fallen empires, not ruined, not broken, just shelved, archived, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, still whispering. The world is loud again. You've returned to modern streets, blinking under streetlights, dodging scooters, hearing conversations that mean nothing and everything. History feels distant here, background noise to the buzz of neon and news cycles, and yet you carry it with you like dust on your shoes. You pass a university building and peer inside. Students scroll through slides about ancient trade routes. One yawns, another types without looking. A lecturer's voice drones about Bronze Age network collapse, but the room smells more like coffee than curiosity. You smile, because you've seen it, not just the facts, but the feeling, the texture of endings, the softness of civilizations crumbling into time's open hands, the elegance of absence. You visit a gallery where fragments of the past are mounted like butterflies, a cracked stela, a segment of Khmer lintel, a rusted spear from Gaul. They're beautiful in the way fossils are beautiful, quiet, final, misunderstood. A child points at a Songhai coin and asks, "Was this from Africa or a video game?" The parent shrugs, "Both, maybe." You nod quietly. That's not wrong. You walk through city parks, past sculptures that look vaguely Mesopotamian, and bus stops covered in graffiti that might outlast the metal beneath. You see the patterns everywhere now, not just in museums, but in forgotten storefronts, outdated logos, the skeletal malls of your own civilization, mini empires, all of them, once proud, now marked for clearance. Historians still argue whether we're due for another collapse. Some whisper about environmental limits, economic wobbles, digital dependencies, but maybe the real question isn't if, it's how loud we'll be when we go. Will we fade like Tartessos, or scream like a fire sale? You sit by a canal, the modern kind, concrete and controlled. A plastic bottle drifts past like a souvenir from an empire that doesn't know it's already ancient. You jot that down. You've begun to understand that collapse doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wears a hoodie and checks its phone too often. And still there's beauty, even in decay, even in drift, maybe especially in drift. That night, back in your hotel room, you look out the window at a skyline made of glass and ambition. Somewhere, a building crane spins like a compass. Somewhere else, an old man recites poetry in a language no app can translate. You turn off the lights. You sleep with the calm of someone who has seen empires fall and knows that the stars don't flinch. Tonight, you dream not of ruins, but of beginnings. You walk through a city that hasn't been built yet. Its streets are outlines, its buildings sketches in the air. People walk past you, humming songs that don't exist, dressed in patterns borrowed from memories you never had. There's no king here, no banners or declarations of greatness, just the quiet bustle of something coming into being. The stones haven't been laid, but the intention is solid. You recognize it immediately, the first breath of an empire, and you know how it ends. But that doesn't matter, does it? Because now you see it, that the fall is never the full story. The collapse, the disappearance, the final fading, they're chapters, yes, but not the whole book. The real story is how it all begins, again and again and again. Empires are stubborn, not the structures, the people, the dreamers, the builders, the ones who stack stone after stone, knowing deep down that one day vines will reclaim it all, but they build anyway, because something in us always insists, one more time. Historians still argue whether this is optimism or madness, but maybe it's something gentler, something quieter, a desire to belong to something larger than a breath, to stitch your moment into the tapestry, even if the thread frays. You sit at the edge of this not yet city and watch children draw plans in the dirt. Their hands move like architects, like gods, and the dirt, it doesn't mind it's hosted kingdoms before. It knows how this ends, but it also knows how it starts. You wake slowly, peacefully, not with a jolt, but with a stretch. The world outside your window is still standing. Cars hum, clouds drift. Somewhere, someone is laying the first brick of something vast, and it will fall. Of course it will. But for now, it rises. You walk now not through stone or jungle, but through questions, loose ones, half buried in your thoughts, like relics scattered across time. You followed collapse across continents and oceans, and yet what lingers most isn't what was lost, it's what never quite made sense to begin with. You think about the Hittites, whose empire unraveled in whispers and cuneiform. Was it famine, war, bureaucratic meltdown, or just an empire tired of being impressive? You remember the Khmer, wrapping their temples in carved gods and devouring themselves with ambition. What was Angkor Wat in the end? Devotion or vanity? And does it matter if now it stands as one of the quietest places to marvel at what humans once believed? You wonder about Songhai. Did they ever imagine defeat would come not from betrayal or uprising, but from strangers with smoke and steel? Or Tartessos, swallowed not by fire, but by myth, until even the storytellers forgot the words? And Nan Madol, built on coral, touched by moonlight, did it ever intend to be found again? Historians still argue, of course. That's their job. But maybe the rest of us can let go of the need to explain. Maybe it's enough to feel these absences and smile at their mystery, to sit beside what once was and say softly, "I see you." You pass a mural on a city wall, modern, bright, almost defiant. It shows a skeleton in royal robes, dancing, not grim, joyful, like it knows something we don't, or maybe something we've just started to remember. That decline isn't failure, it's transformation. Compost for the next idea. You sit beneath it, and for the first time, after so many ruins, you feel not melancholy, but permission. To rest, to let things end. To begin again later, maybe, or not. You're walking a shoreline now, not a famous one. No plaques, no historical markers, just sand, water, and the gentle rhythmical pull of tide meeting earth, the kind of place where empires never were and never will be. And yet, here you are, carrying all of them with you. The breeze smells of salt and beginnings. Behind you, your footprints vanish almost instantly, a slow erasure performed by waves with excellent timing. You pause, look back, and smile. Even your presence is temporary, and that's okay. Up ahead, a child is building something, not with ambition, but with attention. Hands patting wet sand, eyes squinting against the sun. You approach. Is it a city, you ask. They nod, but don't stop working. For now, they reply. That answer sinks into you like an anchor dropped gently in soft water. For now, that's all any of it ever was. The Hittite kings who signed treaties in stone, the Khmer engineers balancing faith and hydraulics, the Songhai scribes penning their last letters, the Tartessians vanishing into metaphor, the priests of Nan Madol drifting between tide and ritual, they all built for now. You crouch beside the child, watch as a moat forms and then collapses. They rebuild without comment, no panic, just the quiet understanding that everything comes and goes, and what matters is the shaping, not the keeping. Historians still argue whether we learn from collapse, whether it teaches humility or just cycles into repetition. But right now, it doesn't feel like a lesson, it feels like a lullaby. You sit, you breathe, you watch the castle take its shape. You do not stop the tide. When the water arrives, and it always does, the towers fall gently. No drama, no last stand, just surrender. And then the child begins again. You lie back on the sand, warm and drowsy. Above you, the sky fades slowly into evening. No alarms, no endings, just a long, deep exhale. And in that breath, you finally understand. Empires rise, empires fall, and you rest. Now as the last echoes of fallen empires fade into the edges of your sleep, allow your breath to slow. You've walked through centuries tonight. You've felt the hush of temples overtaken by vines, the weight of gold that no longer shines, and the silence of stone cities that no longer need to be understood. Let that silence comfort you now. Let it remind you that everything, every noise, every building, every name, eventually softens. History is not just events, it's the space between them, the lull, the pause, the forgetting that makes room for remembering. You are safe here, in this quiet, in this drift. No need to hold on to any of it. The Hittites can rest, the Khmer can sleep, Songhai's river still flows, Tartessos hums in silt, Nan Madol sighs with the tide. And you are part of their story now, not as a conqueror, not as a scholar, but as someone who listened. So rest your body, ease your mind. Let the rhythm of breath guide you deeper. The ruins will be here when you wake, but for now, let the world go. Let the stars take over. Let yourself sleep